Yeah, so just to say a little bit more about the course design and the kind of overall makeup of the course, I suppose. There are a lot of different components to this course, and logistically it's a little bit of a nightmare. Getting all the students to know what they're doing exactly and when takes a lot of effort in the first few weeks. But there are several different components, as I say. There's my lectures here at King's, which are based on a series of different locations, and then there are the corresponding seminars.
And they're on particular plays as well as locations, aren't they?
Yeah.
So each lecture and seminar is on a play and a location.
That's absolutely right, yeah. So each lecture and seminar, I take a key play and a location that it's thematically connected to. So for today's example, Richard II and politics, and our location is Whitehall, the Palace of Whitehall. Yeah, so that's the kind of King's component of the course. In addition, there is the ongoing online mapping project, which I've already talked quite a bit about, which will ultimately form part of the students' assessment for the course. And that's a new initiative. It's sponsored by the College Teaching and Learning Fund. I got some funding to do that. So that's a new initiative, as I say. And then the other component of the course is that this is the only undergraduate course in the country where students get to work with Globe Education. And that's the result of a long-standing collaboration between the King's English Department and Globe Education. We've had a 10-year running MA course that has a component of the students being taught by Globe Education, and that's been really successful, and so we started to think about how we could extend that opportunity to undergraduate students. And so for 3 weeks out of the course, the students go over to the Globe and have a series of workshops looking at things like, you know, the early morning performance context. What was it like to go to the theatre in Shakespeare's day? They have a tour of the theatre and they go on stage and they learn about the different areas of the stage and what they symbolically represented, and who would have sat in the audience in the different places. They get to go at denouncing a speech from the stage, for example. So that they do some interesting stuff over there. They also work with Globe musicians and costume designers, and last year we did hair and makeup, and yeah, so that's another aspect of giving them this London context. It's been a challenge on the course to try and integrate the Globe component with what I do here. And last year that was the main criticism that was levelled at me in the feedback, was that they thought the Globe was a lot of fun and they loved going over there, but they couldn't understand how it related to what they did at King's, and particularly to their final assessment, which they got quite upset about, really, because I suppose students want to feel that everything they do is being assessed, or seem to want to feel that.
Can you tell us more about the assessment structure and how that works?
Yeah, well, we've tried to improve it this year by introducing there are two forms of assessment. One is a 15% participation grade, which is based on their contribution to the online map. And the other piece of work that they're asked to do is a coursework essay, a more traditional coursework essay, which is worth the remaining 85%. But the coursework essay specifically asks them, and I've told the students this from the beginning, it specifically asks them to look at the plays in their context. And that might be a performance context, or that might be a historical context, but to try and set up for them the expectation that what they're doing at the Globe, as much as what they're doing here at King's, might be brought into that final essay. Yeah, so that's the basic structure of the assessment.
So you're happy with that final essay as carrying the main weight of the course? Do you feel that's the right form?
Well, that's a new balance compared to last year. I had a mid-semester essay, a shorter mid-semester essay, and then a long essay at the end. I don't remember exactly what the proportions were, but as I say, we didn't quite fulfil the need to have the Globe work be part of the assessment with that. The way I'd set it up wasn't quite right to do that. And plus, the intake for the course this year is unusually small for administrative reasons I won't bore you with. There's normally about 85 students on the course, and I'm the only teacher. And doing mid-semester coursework nearly killed me, because the marking was just, you know, having to mark 85 essays or 84 essays during term time, I just can't do that. So, you know, there's certain practical factors come in, as well as, sadly, as well as what's absolutely ideal pedagogically. And I think this year, you know, having the ongoing map project, they are at least getting that sense of kind of doing cumulative work and development kind of as they go along, rather than it all being in the final essay. I would probably like to increase the percentage given for the mapping project, but this is the first year I've done it. It's very much a pilot. These are third year students, so some of them are finalists, and I didn't want to do a kind of experiment where their grade was going to be so important to them. So that's why I've gone for a slightly more traditional breakup of the assessment this year.
So the mapping project and the use of new technology in that is something unusual in King's, is it?
Yeah, very much so. Yes. As I say, this was an innovation grant that I got from the College Teaching and Learning Committee, and I don't know of any other courses in the English department where people are doing similar kind of online projects. No, it is quite unusual. So people use Blackboard for kind of week-by-week teaching, but for actually building an online resource with the students, I don't know if...
So could you talk us through how that works technically and some of the challenges and issues that have arisen as a technical side of it?
With the technical side of it, you mean the actual building side? Or
yes, and the use of new technology in this unusual way.
Well, I only have quite limited observations because we are quite early on in actually putting this into practice. There was a lot of logistical stuff to sort out about who was going to build the map and what they were going to charge us for it and all of that, but we've actually come to a really good working relationship with CCH, the Centre for Computing and the Humanities, who do a lot of kind of map building projects anyway. So they're going to build it for us. Communicating to the students what the map is ultimately going to look like has been quite a challenge, but I've been able to work with them. I have a massive great poster of the 1572 map of London that's going to be the basis for the online map, and I've put the high resolution TIFF file on Blackboard on which they can zoom in to kind of street level and look at individual buildings even. It's amazing, this high res file that we got from the British Library. So I'm trying to get the students to have a kind of visual sense of what the map will look like quite early on. Ideally, what I would have liked to have done is have the students work with some kind of VLE where they could be directly putting the content into the map. That's not going to happen because we haven't got to the point where there's really a suitable resource yet that's up and running here in King's that will enable them to do it. I'm saying this, Brett probably knows of 50 that I could have used that would have been much better. But at the moment what we're doing is we're having them produce the content and then, email us picture files or text documents, and then the GTAs and I are going to do the actual putting it into the site, working with the CMS.
Yes.
I didn't think it was fair to expect students to learn how to work with the CMS at this point, although it may be a valuable life skill. So that's a slight technical complication, is that it's going to be quite labour intensive for the graduate teaching assistants actually, doing all of the web building.
So the students are producing text about the locations and images and
audio
and links and audio,
and
right?
Potentially video if they want to as well.
And perhaps the difficulty with that is they don't quite know the form it will eventually take in the electronic resource.
Well, is
that a problem?
Well, that's why I've hired graduate teaching assistants to work with them, as I said, after each seminar they sit down as a group with one of the GTAs, and this is part of what they're being asked to do really, is come up collectively with a vision for what they want their bit of the site to look like, and I'm putting the responsibility for that onto them. Obviously the GTAs are there to guide them to make sure we don't get 6 identical entries, we don't get 6 pieces of text, we need different media to be in each entry. But I mean it's, learning how to kind of manage a project as a group is one of the skills they're going to get out of this, I suppose, and later on editing one another's work will be part of what they'll do as well. So that's the idea behind that bit.
Yes, so one of the things you're doing is putting a lot of pressure on the students to come up with decisions about exactly what they do. Because, for example, they could do a lot of different things with audio.
Yeah.
I suppose. Yeah.
So
So by and large, do they deal well with that? Have you given them that freedom, knowing that they would be able to deal with that? Are there any?
Yeah, I don't see it as putting pressure on them. I see it as giving them freedom, and I've very much said to them, this is limited by your imagination. And I mean, we're 2-3 weeks in at this point, so I can't say how it's going to turn out. But so far, they've been really excited by that, and I've had random emails saying, oh, I know someone who works at the Tower of London. I want to go and record sound effects of such and such. Is this okay? And yes, go for it. They seem to actually be responding really well to having the freedom. And again, there is a support mechanism in place. I didn't just send them off on their own and say, come back in 3 weeks with some web content. They have this meeting with the graduate teaching assistants. They have support in developing what they want to do. They have the contact details of the teaching assistant. They can go and talk to her further if they want to have more advice about what they're doing. So it's about giving them the kind of freedom, but in a supported way, I suppose. And these are third-year students. They're not first years. They should be both mature enough and far enough along in their studies to be able to take advantage of the opportunity.
So have you taught groups in this way before, telling them to go out and do a project in that sort of cooperative way?
This is a new thing, wholly new thing for me. I have to say, partly under the influence of the English Subject Centre and your early careers lecturers workshop, which I came to last year and which was extremely helpful and inspiring. It's taken me a year to kind of get something going. But I was a brand new lecturer last year. I didn't have much spare energy, I have to say. But this year I've been in a position where I've been able to try and put some of the ideas we heard there into practice.
How exactly is the assessment going to work, given that the work that these groups are producing is collaborative? Yeah,
well, that's a really good question. So I've been very simplistic in my approach to this. I've been very frank with the students about this. I'm looking for a contribution. If they make a decent contribution, if they turn up to the meetings they're meant to be at, if they post online when they're meant to, if they produce some content, they will get pretty much 90% of the 15%. Most of the marks is purely for the contribution. I will leave, probably a remaining 10%, so I can give, extra bonus marks for students who go above and beyond.
Is all the content attributed to individual students then, or is it?
Yeah, they've all got distinct bits that they're working on.
Yeah.
And the graduate teaching assistants are keeping track of who's doing what for me, and they're sort of my spies to make sure. Well, that's a very negative way of putting it, but they're making sure that everyone's pulling their weight in the group. And I have said to Jennifer and Sarah, my assistants, that if they get the sense that somebody's not pulling their weight, they need to tell me, and that's a problem. And I will address that as and when it comes up. But the default assumption is if you show good faith, if you contribute, you're going to get close to the full 15 marks. This is a chance to kind of bump up your grade, really, and I've kind of put it that way to the students. I don't know. We'll see how it works.
Is one of the motives for doing this wondering how to integrate an awareness of historical context with close reading of literature? Yeah. And is that something? I mean, if that is one of your aims, is it being achieved? Do you think is it going to work?
That's definitely. I mean, that's the single main aim for the course, and that again, it partly reflects my research agenda. I think. Is it successfully being achieved? I think I'm doing a better job of it this year than I did last year. Last year it was, a new course, and I think last year there was a tendency for, like I've said before, there was a tendency for students to not quite realise why the context was so important to the readings of the plays until the assessment exercise, and then suddenly they all panicked and they thought, why am I being expected to bring context into my reading of the play? This year I am making much more effort in lectures and in seminar to explain why each piece of context matters and kind of how it matters. I don't know if they're getting the message yet. It's too early in the course to get to know whether they're understanding that, but I think it's going better than it did last year from that point of view.
Are there already things that you want to change for next year? Or will you run it much the same way as you have this year?
That's a good question. I think I haven't yet hit upon big things I want to change. I mean, you know, structural alterations to some of the lectures, for example, I may do next year. But I very much base my adjustments to the course on the student feedback that I get, the course evaluations which we get at the end of the course, which are quite detailed. I've made a lot of changes on the basis of what we got last year. So I'm kind of waiting for those in a way to make any big decisions about what happens to the course next year.
Has working on this course given you ideas for designing other courses or different sorts of course structure?
Yeah. It has. I mean, it's opened up for me a certain kind of freedom, I suppose, to play with course format and modes of assessment. This is a long way from the kind of traditional courses that we teach at King's. It's also made me aware that sometimes these less traditional course structures can be more work than they're worth, very frankly.
Yes.
Because so much of my energy goes into making sure the students know where they're meant to be each week, what they're doing each week, why each bit of information matters. So another new course that I taught for the first time in the autumn, Renaissance Wordplay, I just went back to the totally traditional lecture seminar. I think there's a place for both in the curriculum, and I think it's really good for students to have some courses where they're expected to figure things out a lot more, and you know there is more asked of them in terms of you know, untraditional formats, for want of a better way of putting it. But I think also there needs to be some courses where there's just the stability of lecture seminar. Partly because it's so exhausting to organise these courses with all the bells and whistles, and partly just because I think it's good for them to have the contrast, really. Different students learn in different ways. Some of them love the fact that, you know, they do a week with me and then they're going to the Globe and then they're working on the map, and some of them are completely at sea. And obviously I do as much as I can to help them, but you know, students do fundamentally have different learning styles. Some students are going to respond better to this kind of course than others. So I think it's important to offer the variety in the overall curriculum.
And finally, do you have advice, or rather what advice do you have for other lecturers who might be wanting to put on, to design this sort of course at another institution? What have you learned from the process that you can pass on?
Well, I've learned it's tremendously rewarding, but as I've said, it's a lot more work than the other courses that I teach to manage. There's a lot more fielding of emails of where am I meant to be going and all of that stuff. So be aware that if you're doing something like this, you need to have a bit of you know, give in your schedule that will allow you to give it the extra time. And also just the setup phase is a lot of work. You know, establishing, in this case, you know, we're managing a relationship with an external partner at Globe Education. We're managing, I am managing the relationship with the web builders and the technological side of things, the mapping. I have two graduate and teaching assistants to manage, and then the lectures and seminars on top of that. So actually getting all of that, hiring the people, finding who was going to understand the projects and be involved in the course in the first place took a long time, and then actually putting it into effect takes a long time. The other thing perhaps to say is that it's very difficult to avoid the perception amongst the students that certain parts of the course are fun and certain parts of the course are less fun. And this is probably the single thing that's the biggest problem with this course. You know, they love going to the Globe, they seem to be really loving the mapping, and then there's lectures and seminars. And it doesn't help that it's Monday 9 AM lecture. But trying to get them to understand that the mapping is academic and the Globe is academic in just the same ways, you know, something that I'm really trying to emphasise. But it's very difficult to overcome that perception. If anyone else is running a course like this, you know, you have to be prepared for the course evaluation saying, "Oh, we loved going to the Globe," you know, and nothing. I mean, I had endless that just said nothing about all of my teaching last semester. And I'd taken the students on trips, I'd taken them to the theatre, none of that was mentioned. I'd run a Blackboard site, they didn't mention that. It was all, the Globe was so much fun. And I wanted to throw myself under a bus. So, but then talking to the students, they had really positive and useful feedback about the more traditional components of the course. But just be prepared that if you're doing something like this, you know, they go for the flashy bits, and you don't necessarily get the credit if you're kind of giving the bog standard lectures. So, you know, you have to sort of prepare yourself a little bit for that. But that's entirely a selfish approach from me as a lecturer. From the student's point of view, you know, I think it's fantastic to have the experience that they get over there at the theatre. It's really invaluable.